There are nights that don't belong to time, nights when the first chill of winter wind sweeps across the bare fields of Ireland, and the moon hangs above like a silent eye, watching as humankind lights its very first fire. They called it Samhain, the night that marked the end of autumn and the beginning of the cold, a fragile moment when the line between the living and the dead became no more than a breath. On distant hills, fires flickered and glowed. The Celts believed that those flames did more than chase away the darkness. They lit the path for the spirits of their ancestors to return home. They wore masks made of animal hide, walking together through the village, carrying burning torches, singing with voices both fearful and reverent. It wasn't fear they sought, but understanding that to hold on to life, one must sometimes bow before the dark. The firelight danced across their faces and time seemed to stop. No one truly knew when that night began or why it fell at the end of October. All they knew was that through the mist and the smoke, a tradition was born. Not just a ritual, but a way for humanity to speak to the universe and say, we are still here. Thousands of years later, when the Celtic hills had long turned to ruins, when the sacred fires of Samhain had become candlelight flickering in the windows of modern American homes, people still carried that memory under a new name, Halloween. How could an ancient ritual born of frost and sacred flame survive the march of millennia to become one of the world's greatest celebrations? The answer lies in the fire itself. The same fire once lit to bid farewell to the harvest and to whisper softly to the souls who had gone before. Welcome to Lunora, where history whispers beneath the stars. The Celts had a name for the last night of October, a name that, when spoken aloud, almost sounds like the wind rushing through the valleys. Samhain. No one knows who first uttered it. It was passed from mouth to mouth like breath in the mist. Long ago, the Celtic tribes lived scattered across the lands of Ireland, Scotland, and what is now Wales. They didn't build great pyramids like the Egyptians, nor carve their stories in stone like the Sumerians. They lived close to nature, close to the wind, the earth, and the rhythm of the seasons. And for them, the new year didn't begin with spring. It began with darkness. Because only when everything dies can life be born again. Samhain was the threshold between autumn and winter, between light and shadow, between the living and the dead. When the sun sank behind the hills, the Druids, priests of the Celts, stepped before the villagers, torches blazing in their hands. They climbed to the highest hilltops where the wind roared and the sky stretched wide, and there they lit the first sacred fire of the night. From that holy flame, each family carried home a single ember, a ritual act passing the light of the gods into the hearts of humankind. The fire on the hill was believed to guide ancestral spirits back home. People set an extra place at the table for unseen guests, leaving their doors open to welcome them in. On that night, death was not an end, but a brief return, a touch between two worlds. Yet Samhain was more than remembrance. It was a night of prophecy, a night when the veil between worlds grew thin and whispers from the future could be heard. The Druids cast animal bones into the fire, reading the cracks and sparks, listening for signs of what lay ahead. The harvest, the storms, or the fate of a person. As the night deepened, villagers dressed in animal hides and wooden masks, moving from house to house in half ritual, half celebration. They did not disguise themselves for amusement, but to fool wandering spirits, for if the dead could return, the darkness might follow them too. Each family kept a glowing coal from the sacred fire, placing it in their stone hearth to burn through the long winter. That ember was more than warmth. It was a prayer, a small piece of divine light guarding their home until spring. Some say Samhain was simply a harvest festival, but to the Celts it was something deeper, a dialogue with the universe itself. In the flicker of the flame, they saw their own reflection, small, fragile, yet part of the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And when dawn rose and the mist lifted from the fields, the hilltop fire faded to smoke. Only its scent lingered in their hair, in their clothes, in their memory. A new season began, and with it a new year. A year of darkness, patience, and quiet endurance, moving in rhythm with the breath of the cosmos. No one knows what they thought as they gazed into the last embers. Maybe it was hope that spring would return. Maybe it was simple gratitude that they had survived another turning of the wheel. But perhaps in that very moment, they planted the seed of a tradition that would never fade, tradition the world would one day call Halloween. And when the next Samhain came, the Celts lit their fires once more. But this time, on the far horizon, sails appeared, coming from the south, bringing with them a new faith, a new god, and another kind of light. In the world of the Celts, time was not a straight road. It didn't move forward like an arrow, but turned endlessly like a great wheel. They called it the Wheel of the Year. Each turn carried the 4 seasons, and each season held its own celebration. In the lands where ocean winds swept across wide green meadows, people didn't measure time by calendars or clocks, but by soil, by mist, and by the breath of the earth itself. On that wheel were 8 sacred points, 8 moments that defined the rhythm of life: Samhain, Yule, Imbolc, Ostara, Beltane, Litha, Lughnasadh, and Mabon. Samhain sat at the bottom of the wheel where darkness began to grow. To the Celts, that wasn't an ending, but a pause, a quiet breath in the life cycle. When the harvest was done, the earth needed to sleep, and people needed stillness. It was the silence before everything was born again. Each festival was a reminder of that eternal circle. In spring, they celebrated Imbolc, when the first light returned and the frost melted. In summer, they welcomed Beltane, the festival of fire, love, and new life. By Lughnasadh, the fields glowed gold with harvest, and they gave thanks to the earth and sky. And when the sun grew weak and the winds turned cold, the wheel spun once more toward Samhain, the time of darkness, of rest, and of rebirth. To the Celts, the universe held no wall between life and death. They were simply 2 beats in the same song. One soul departed so another could arrive. A seed that decayed in the soil was a promise of the next spring. Death was not the opposite of life. It was part of the great journey of existence. They saw the world differently from those who came later, people who feared endings, who feared the dark. To the Celts, the end was only a pause, a single heartbeat in the turning of the wheel. That's why Samhain was never a festival of sorrow. It was a celebration of transformation. In the flicker of the flames lit on the last night of October, they saw the pattern of all things: light, flaring, fading, and rising again from the ashes. The Druids would say, "We do not move through time, we live within its turning." That is why they honored both the cold of winter and the brightness of summer. Every moment had a spirit, and the task of humankind was to listen to it. The rituals of Samhain reflected that belief. When they wore masks, when they placed bread and apples upon the table, they were reenacting the circle of life. The mask reminded them that every identity fades away. The fire reminded them that darkness never lasts forever. And the food offered to ancestors was a quiet vow that no matter how many generations passed, life would always continue through memory. The Celts did not fight nature. They didn't pray for winter to vanish, they learned to live with it. They didn't run from death, they lit torches to guide their way through the long night. Their civilization wasn't built on stone, but on understanding. The understanding of life's cycles and how all things return. And when the wheel of the year completed its circle, Samhain returned again, the season of remembrance. It was the time to honor those who had gone, to reflect on what was lost, on mistakes, and on small joys. In the glow of the fire and the breath of the mist, entire tribes gathered, looking back together, and then letting go. There were no temples, no formal prayers, only wind, fire, and the stillness shared between people sitting side by side. In that silence, one could feel what humanity would later call faith. Pure, ancient, untouched. It was the feeling of belonging to something greater than oneself. And that is what Samhain has done for thousands of years. It taught humankind how to accept the flow of time. But the wheel never stops turning. When it reached the 8th century, a new light began to spread northward. Across the very lands once bright with Samhain fires, the missionaries of the church arrived, carrying crosses, hymns, and a different faith. Yet the ancient flame did not die. It only changed its form, from the torches of the Druids to the candles of the church. When the Celts spoke of Samhain, they weren't describing a single holiday. They were describing a state of the world, a fragile moment when the boundary between two realms began to fade, when everything could pass through everything else, light through shadow, spirits among the living, and humans becoming spirits themselves. In that crossing, 3 eternal symbols were born: the fire, the mask, and the wandering soul. The fire was the heart of Samhain. It was more than light. It was the spirit of the entire ritual. As night fell, the Druids climbed the highest hill to ignite the hill fire, the sacred flame of the village. From afar, that light blazed through the mist like a call from the ancestors. No one spoke much. They stood around it in silence, listening to the wood crackle, the smoke mingling with the smell of burning hides, the heat brushing softly across their faces. The elders whispered the names of the departed as if speaking through the flame itself, while the young ones bowed their heads, placing in the fire a handful of seeds, a piece of bread, a quiet promise for the year ahead. In that glow, death no longer held fear. It was not an end, but a rhythm of return. When a log burned down, its ashes fell into the soil, and from that ash, spring would rise again. The fire was the bridge between two worlds, one that could be touched and one that could only be felt. Then came the mask, something that both concealed and revealed the human soul. The Celts did not wear masks for fun. They wore them to survive. They believed that on the night of Samhain, when spirits could freely walk among the living, not all of them were kind. There were lost souls, nameless shadows, and fears without faces. To avoid being recognized and taken away, people disguised themselves as the very things they feared. They covered themselves in animal hides, smeared ash across their faces, and wore rough wooden masks. If they looked like wandering spirits, the restless dead would pass them by. In that disguise lived fear, but also freedom. For when you hide your face, you can become anyone or anything. The mask, then, was more than protection. It was transformation, a symbol of accepting both light and darkness within oneself. On Samhain night, wearing a mask wasn't about hiding. It was an admission that each of us carries a small piece of death inside. And then there were the souls. To the Celts, a soul was not distant or abstract. It was everywhere. In the breath of the wind, in the glimmer of dew, in the warmth of fire, in the soil of the fields where their ancestors once planted seeds. On Samhain night, people left bread, apples, and milk by their doors, not as offerings of fear, but invitations of gratitude, welcoming the spirits home to share a meal. A simple gesture, but one filled with meaning. They believed that forgetting this ritual would bring harsher winters, longer nights, and weaker herds. But if they welcomed the dead with sincerity, their ancestors would bless the coming year with warmth and plenty. In some villages, families even set a table for the departed, placing empty chairs and candles that burned until dawn. Inside those quiet homes, the two worlds seemed to breathe together as one. The Celts never believed in absolute separation. They thought that between the living and the dead lay only a thin veil. And on Samhain night, that veil opened like a door. No one knew how wide it opened or when it would close again, but everyone could feel something passing through. In the cold wind across the hills, they sometimes heard faint footsteps in the leaves. They didn't run or scream. They simply lit another torch and whispered softly, "I know you are here. Go in peace." It was in moments like these that the Celts redefined the darkness. To them, darkness was not an enemy, it was an old companion. They didn't seek to banish it, they learned to speak with it. From that calm understanding, Halloween inherited its dual nature, both haunting and comforting. Over thousands of years, the fire became the jack-o'-lantern, the mask became the costume, and the soul became the ghost story told in the dark. Yet beneath every laugh and every scream, something ancient still lingers. The fire, the mask, and the soul. Three symbols binding humanity to what it cannot grasp, yet forever longs to name. And as those rituals drifted down from the Celtic hills into the first monasteries of Europe, a quiet meeting began. The moment when the fire of Samhain met the candlelight of the church, when the spirits of the ancestors met the saints of a new faith, and when the Celtic mask finally stood before the cross of Christ. When the fires of Samhain blazed across the hills, there were no cries of sorrow, no weeping, no fear. In the eyes of the Celts, death was not an ending. It was a doorway, a step across, only to return again in another form. In their world, fear and reverence were never separate. They were two halves of the same soul. The Celts believed that life was a closed circle. People were born from the earth, and to the earth they would return. Death, to them, was not departure, but homecoming. If life was the flame, then death was the warmth that lingered after the fire had gone, unseen but still there. On the night of Samhain, they did not shut death out, they invited it in. A chair left empty, a piece of bread, a burning candle. Their way of saying, "I do not fear you, for you are part of me." In that gesture lay something the modern world has forgotten, a calm acceptance of impermanence. In the northern reaches of Ireland, stories were told of the dead returning as light, a cool breath slipping through the door, a tiny spark drifting across the roof, or the faint sound of footsteps on fallen leaves. No one was afraid. They would only whisper softly, "Father has come home." In those whispers, the boundary between the living and the dead dissolved. Perhaps it was this closeness, this quiet intimacy, that gave Samhain its solemn, timeless beauty, a beauty that outlasted all later religions. The Druids, priests of the Celtic world, did not preach doctrine or promise heaven and hell. They simply reminded people, when a forest dies, it leaves seeds for the next. When a person dies, their soul lights the way for those who follow. In that world view, death was not a darkness that devoured, but a silence that allowed light to be reborn. That is why Samhain was always celebrated with reverence, not grief. The music of the night was not a hymn, but the slow, haunting sound of flutes echoing across the hills. Children sat around the fire, listening to their elders tell stories of ancestors long gone, of heroes who vanished into legend, of spirits resting in the wind. Every story was a thread, weaving each listener into the memory of their people. Death, in Celtic belief, was not personal loss but communal memory. It was not hidden behind church walls or treated as taboo. It was the first and final lesson of life, that all beings belong to one eternal cycle. But when Christianity began to spread across these lands, this belief left missionaries uneasy. How could they preach heaven and hell to people who did not believe in absolute judgment? How could they speak of salvation when the Celts believed the soul needed no saving, only a return to where it truly belonged? The Church understood that a new faith could not survive by burning down the old one. It had to blend, like a candle quietly joining the last embers of the sacred fire. And so Christianity did not erase Samhain, it absorbed it. On the very hills where the Druids once lit their fires, priests built small churches. They declared All Saints' Day on November 1st, a day to honor the saints. The night before All Hallows' Eve became a vigil for the souls of the dead. The sacred fire of Samhain became the candlelight of the Church. The spirits of ancestors became saints. The ancient calling of souls became a holy remembrance. From this union of fire and faith, the word Halloween was born. Yet in the hearts of the Celts the essence never changed. They still lit their fires, they still left bread for the ancestors, they still wore masks and told stories under the night sky. They knew that religion could change, but memory could not. Samhain had taught them the greatest truth, that between fear and reverence there is no true divide. When we bow before what we do not understand, fear becomes understanding, and in that moment, peace is found. For thousands of years, Halloween has been more than a night of costumes. It is a mirror reflecting humanity's oldest fear, the fear of being forgotten, and its deepest wish, to be remembered. And as Christianity moved deeper into the Celtic lands, carrying crosses and hymns, Samhain did not die. It simply changed its shape, hiding beneath a new name, All Hallows Eve. From there began a new journey, the blending of ancient fire and sacred faith, opening the next chapter in the story of everlasting light. Before humans ever measured time with calendars, clocks, or the idea of dates, the Celts already had their own eternal clock, the sky. Every star was a mark of memory, every constellation a story whispered by the fire on Samhain night. To them, time didn't live in numbers, but in light, the slow movement of stars across the darkness, a rhythm so quiet only those who truly listened could feel it. Samhain came when the stars signaled the turning of the year toward cold. When the Pleiades, that small, bright cluster, reached its highest point at midnight, it marked the moment the great wheel of the year turned to its shadow side. The Celts believed that when the Pleiades stood at their peak, the door between worlds opened. Ancestral spirits could return, and wandering souls could find their way home by starlight. That is why the night of Samhain was not only a festival of fire, it was a festival of the sky. The Druids, the Celtic priests, were not just keepers of ritual but observers of the cosmos. They tracked the rising and setting of the sun, memorized the cycles of the moon, and counted the paths of the stars. The Samhain fires were lit exactly at sunset, when the sun dipped toward the southwest, the direction they believed to be the gateway of winter. On ancient hills, the Celts raised stone pillars aligned with the sun and constellations of Samhain. In sacred places like Tara and Uisnech in Ireland, remnants of those alignments still remain. It is said that at Samhain, when the setting sun cast its light perfectly along the main pillar, its shadow stretched across the entire hill, a single thread connecting earth to sky. To the Celts, this was not just astronomy, it was proof that humanity still moved in harmony with the universe. They believed the stars were the eyes of the gods, and when those eyes shone upon the world during Samhain, the living was seen, acknowledged, remembered. People would stand quietly beneath the night sky, lifting their gaze until their souls seemed to reflect in the distant light above. Ancient legends told that after death, a person's soul rose to the heavens and became a new star. When a child was born, they would say, "A star has just been lit." Death, then, lost its weight. On Samhain nights, when the heavens glimmered bright, they felt as if they were looking into the faces of those they had loved, shining still, watching over them, the fire on the hills and the stars in the sky, two lights intertwined. One belonged to humankind, the other to eternity. One burned from ash, the other burned forever. Their meeting created the mystery of Samhain, a celebration of earth and sky, of the finite and the infinite, of humanity and the immortal soul. It was no coincidence that the Celts chose the darkest night of the year as the beginning of the new one. They believed that only in the deepest dark could light be born again. Samhain was the symbol of that moment, the still point between death and life, when the world seemed to pause and take one silent breath before beginning anew. The Druids called it the still point, the resting heart of the great wheel, when time itself stood still and all souls, living and dead, existed together in a single cosmic hush. Perhaps it was only belief, but belief was enough. It kept Samhain alive through thousands of years. Without scripture, without dogma, only the sky and the light. Today, people might call it myth. But when we look up at the late October sky, something ancient stirs within us, a feeling both distant and familiar, as if some old part of our being still remembers. This is the time between worlds, when the veil between life and death grows thin as smoke, and when the Pleiades rise once more and the sun crosses the threshold of winter. The Celts knew the old cycle had ended. The Samhain fires dimmed, but their ashes became the seeds of what was yet to come. In the silence they would whisper, "The world has turned once more." They did not know that thousands of years later, when the hills had turned to memory and church bells replaced the sound of flutes, Samhain would still live, under another name, in another form. Yet the starlight and the firelight would remain the same, and when Christianity finally reached those lands, it brought with it a new faith, and a new way of looking at the sky, the soul, and the life beyond death. It was the moment when two worlds met, the fire of Samhain and the candlelight of the church. There was a moment in history when two flames met, one crackling on the wind-swept hills of the Celtic lands, and one flickering softly within the grey stone walls of the monasteries, glowing with the gentle light of faith. When Christianity arrived, it didn't come like a storm. It drifted in like mist, slow, patient, and unstoppable. Around the 5th century, the first missionaries stepped ashore in Ireland. Among them was Patrick, the man who would later become Saint Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland. He carried a cross, hymns in Latin, and a belief that there was only one Creator, the Lord of heaven and earth. But Patrick also understood something vital. If the seed of his faith was to take root in Celtic soil, he could not tear out the roots that were already there. He didn't burn the ancient shrines, he built churches upon them. He didn't forbid Samhain, he reinterpreted it. In his early sermons, he preached that the light of Christ was stronger than the darkness of Samhain, that the souls of the ancestors no longer wandered aimlessly, for they now had a home in heaven. But when Samhain night came, the villagers still lit their fires because they knew no other way to bid farewell to autumn. Priests passing through the villages saw people leaving bread and milk by their doors, candles burning for the dead. They did not stop them. They simply said, "Pray for them, that their souls may rest in the Lord." From the embers of Samhain, a new observance began to take shape. All Hallows Eve, the night dedicated to holy souls who had gone before. The Roman Church, meanwhile, was working to unify the many lands under a sacred calendar. They began aligning old festivals with the new faith. By the 8th century, Pope Gregory III declared November 1st to be All Saints' Day, a day to honour the faithful departed. The night before, October 31st, became All Hallows Eve, the night of the hallowed souls. Instead of fires blazing on the hills, candles now glowed in churches. Instead of calling upon the forest gods or the goddesses of harvest, prayers were offered for saints and souls. Yet the fire of Samhain never truly went out. It merely changed form, hidden in candlelight, in incense smoke, in whispered prayers at the window. This blending was not a conquest, but a slow dance between two worlds. Christianity needed the Celtic spirit, its bond with the earth, its reverence for cycles, its acceptance that death was simply part of life. And the Celts, even as they embraced a new faith, kept in their hearts the memory of that night when the living and the dead could speak without fear. In the monasteries of Ireland, monks copied the scriptures by candlelight, while outside, villagers still told stories of ancestral spirits drifting across the hills. Two worlds coexisted, one of written word, one of smoke and flame. And between them, Halloween was being born. Not yet named, but already alive. On damp stone walls, artists carved crosses woven within solar circles, symbols where two beliefs became one. Just as within the hearts of the people, Christ and the old gods lived side by side, not as enemies, but as two different ways of saying the same truth, that life never truly disappears. Every year, as autumn faded, the church bells rang for All Souls' Day, the day after All Saints' Day, and thus was born a sacred trinity of nights, All Hallows' Eve, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day, together known as Hallowtide, the season of souls. Somewhere within those holy nights, Samhain smiled quietly. Though renamed, its essence endured, remembrance, reverence, and acceptance of the endless circle of life and death. Priests told their flock that on All Hallows' Eve a candle should be placed on the window to guide departed souls home. They did not realize they were continuing a ritual that the Celts had practiced for millennia. Only now, instead of calling upon forest spirits, they spoke the name of God. As the hymns echoed through the cold night, and the church bells mingled with the sea wind, the faint light of church candles met the last glowing embers of the Samhain fires. Two worlds touching in one brief, sacred shimmer. Perhaps it is because of that meeting that Halloween still lives today. For deep within every faith, humanity is reaching for the same thing. A way to speak to the darkness and say, I remember you, but I do not fear you. In time, All Hallows' Eve spread across Europe, carried by memory and devotion. But the story didn't end there. The people who kept that memory, the keepers of the old fire, would one day cross the sea, carrying with them the candle of Samhain to a new world, where it would change once more, becoming the Halloween we know today. In the 8th century, on the wind-swept hills of Ireland where the fires of Samhain had once burned bright, cold stone monasteries now stood. Yet within those grey walls the old sound still lingered. The whistle of wind through narrow windows, the faint trace of smoke drifting over the hills, and the whispered prayers for the dead. At that time, the Church was spreading its influence across Europe. Every region had its own gods, its own rites, its own sacred days. To unite them under one faith, the Church needed something greater than power. It needed a shared symbol of holiness. Around the year 731, Pope Gregory III chose November 1st as All Saints' Day, a day to honor not only the saints, but also the unnamed souls of the ordinary people who had lived their faith quietly and completely. At first, this day had nothing to do with Samhain, but when it reached the Celtic lands, something remarkable happened. The people there were already used to devoting the final night of October to their ancestors, to remembering the dead. The idea felt familiar, like a continuation of something they had always known. And so, Samhain and All Saints' Day began to merge, not through command or force, but through memory. The new priests who arrived understood that Samhain could not simply be erased. Instead of forbidding it, they gave it new meaning. If you wish to light your fires, they said, light them for the saints. If you wish to burn candles, let them shine for the souls. If you wish to pray for the departed, pray that God may lead them into heaven. And so was born All Hallows Eve, the night before All Saints' Day. Over time, the name softened. All Hallows Eve became Halloween, and then simply Halloween. The transformation was slow. For centuries, the Celtic spirit lived on beneath the surface. Villagers still lit fires in the fields. They still wore wooden masks. They still left bread and milk by their doors, now calling it a prayer instead of an offering. Within this blend was a quiet beauty, humanity's refusal to forget. Faiths may change, prayers may shift into new languages, but the essence, remembrance, endures. In small country churches, people gathered for All Hallows Mass, a solemn service for the dead. Outside, children carried lanterns and villagers went door to door, bringing cakes in exchange for prayers for loved ones. This tradition became known as souling, the ancestor of modern trick-or-treating. The soul cakes, baked with raisins and spices, represented the release of a soul from purgatory. The poor and the children sang as they went, a soul cake for all the souls for heaven's sake." They weren't asking for candy, they were asking for remembrance. And in the cold breath of night, each song became an invisible bridge between the living and the dead. When the candles on the windowsills burned low, people believed the souls had found their way home. It was the stillest moment of the year, a breath between worlds, when life itself seemed to pause to honor the departed. None of them knew they were shaping a celebration that would outlive empires. They were simply doing what humans have always done, trying to stay close to memory. From small European villages, All Hallows Eve spread across the continent. In England, fires lit up the fields. In Germany, people wore masks to ward off restless spirits. In France, church bells rang through the night. Each place had its own customs, but all shared the same heartbeat, remembrance and reverence for those who had gone before. In the mingling of wind and bells, humanity began to understand something beyond religion. Death is not loss, but part of life itself. All Saints' Day was not merely a victory of the Church, it was the rebirth of Samhain, cloaked in new words, but still carrying its ancient soul. A testament that memory cannot be destroyed, only transformed. And so, while priests sang hymns inside the monasteries and villagers tended their fires across the fields, the two worlds lived side by side, separate yet intertwined, both lighting the same October night. From that harmony, Halloween was born, carrying within it two spirits, one of faith and one of human memory. When night fell over medieval Europe, the continent sank into the slow breath of winter. Candles flickered on windowsills, their golden light spilling across damp stone roads where children and the poor walked slowly through the mist. Each carried a small bag, a song, and a simple belief that a prayer could warm a wandering soul. They called it souling, a tradition that was part faith, part kindness. On the nights of All Hallows Eve, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day, the poor went door to door asking for small cakes, known as soul cakes. In return, they promised to pray for the departed loved ones of the household, each cake representing a soul released from purgatory. The cakes were made of flour, honey, or brown sugar, dotted with raisins and spiced with nutmeg. On top, a small cross was carved, a symbol of Christian faith and a blessing for those who gave and those who received. When handing them out, the giver would whisper softly, "May all souls find peace." Songs filled the villages. In England they sang, "A soul, a soul, a soul for a cake. Please, good missus, for heaven's sake." The laughter of children mixed with the wind, their footsteps crunching on fallen leaves, the smell of baked bread rising from earthen ovens. It was a night both sacred and tender, not for mourning the dead, but for remembering them with warmth. And from that ritual something deeper began to take root. Halloween became the night when all people, rich or poor, met on common ground, memory. The wealthy gave not just bread, but compassion. The poor received not just food, but purpose, the promise to pray. Both believed that with every cake shared, a soul was guided gently toward the light. In the countryside, children carried small lanterns made from hollowed-out turnips, a candle glowing faintly inside to light their way. Symbols of spirits searching for home. That fragile glow became the ancestor of the jack-o'-lantern, the pumpkin lights that still burn on every Halloween night today. But in those centuries, souling was more than a ritual. It was a language of humanity in a world burdened by suffering. Medieval Europe knew the shadow of war, famine, and plague all too well. Death was never far away, and perhaps that was why people learned to share what little they had. When they offered a small cake in the cold, they were reminding each other of an inevitable truth, that one day everyone becomes a soul in need of prayer. Inside churches, priests lit hundreds of candles, each one for a soul. The scent of wax and incense mingled with the toll of bells echoing through the dark. Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord. Outside, the voices of children carried on the wind. It was a gentle symphony, the union of church and hearth, ritual and compassion. By the 14th century, the tradition of souling had spread across England, Ireland, Scotland, Germany and France. Each region gave it its own form. In England, soul cakes; in Germany, apples and chestnuts; in France, candles glowing on graves. Yet everywhere the heart of the custom remained the same: remembrance, prayer, and generosity. To the modern world, souling might seem quaint or naive, but look closer, and it reveals something profound, a connection that today's world still longs for. The bond between people born of empathy. There were no electric lights, no festive parades, only voices, wind, and candlelight illuminating faces full of remembrance. From the misty lanes of medieval Europe, this quiet tradition crossed centuries. When Irish and Scottish immigrants left their homelands for America in the 19th century, they carried with them the recipes for soul cakes, the old souling songs, and the memory of those candlelit nights. They could not have known that in the New World their humble ritual would transform from cakes to candy, from prayers to laughter, from a night of devotion to a night of joy. Yet within the cheerful trick or treat of today, one can still hear faint echoes of the past, a whisper of a soul for a cake. The souling nights faded into history, giving way to new centuries where Halloween took on masks, lanterns, and mysteries. But when the last candle burns out and the scent of baked bread still lingers in the air, people continue to murmur the same ancient words, prayers that have never truly been lost. In every civilization, light has always been the most sacred symbol. It was the first thing humankind learned to create, and the last thing it seeks when the world around it falls into darkness. To the Celts, The fire of Samhain was life itself. To the church, the candle was the soul. Two images that seemed so far apart, yet across the centuries they came to shine with the same meaning, the light of faith, of memory, and of the human desire to rise above the dark. When Samhain was still the great Celtic rite, the fires that burned on the hills were the centre of their world. Each flame was kindled not only to chase away the night, but to link humanity with the cosmos. It was the fire of the gods, of rebirth, of the soul. People carried red embers from the communal bonfire back to their homes, keeping them alive through the winter as if guarding a fragment of life itself. That fire did more than warm the body. It bound the living to their ancestors, the present to the past. Then Christianity arrived, bringing with it another kind of light, not the roaring blaze on the hill, but the quiet flame of a candle in the chapel. The form had changed, but the meaning had not. Both symbolized hope in the long night. In monasteries across Europe, candles became the heart of every ritual. To pray for a soul, they lit a candle. To remember the dead, they placed one on the windowsill, its glow guiding spirits home. From the fire of Samhain to the candle of All Hallows Eve, people were doing the same thing, lighting their fear. That light did not just pierce the night, it illuminated the soul. In a world where death was constant, through plague, through war, through the endless winters, people needed a sign, however small, to remind them that they had not been swallowed by the dark. A single flame at times was enough to keep a spirit from breaking. The Celts believed their fire opened the path for ancestors to return. The Christians believed their candle guided souls to God. Two beliefs not in opposition, but two expressions of the same truth, that death is not the end. Perhaps that is why, even after thousands of years, light remains the heart of Halloween. Under every form, torch, candle, lantern, or pumpkin, it carries the same message. Darkness can only live if we forget to light the flame. The candles of All Souls' Day are the direct descendants of the Samhain fires. People placed them in clay pots on windowsills along village paths, each one burning for a soul remembered. In many rural parts of Europe, priests and villagers would walk together through the graveyards carrying candles. No one was afraid. Instead, it was the most peaceful night of the year, a night when the living and the dead walked side by side beneath a gentle, forgiving light. Fire, in every faith, marks the line between life and disappearance. It can burn or it can guide, it can destroy or renew. Whether it takes the form of the sun, a candle, or a faint spark floating in the fog, its power is not in its shape, but in its meaning. Fire is memory preserved. When we look back on the story of Halloween, we don't just see masks and glowing pumpkins. We see a river of light flowing from the Celtic bonfires that called to the ancestors, to the Christian candles that prayed for their peace. Every generation has lit its own flame, yet all are reflections of that first fire on the hills of Samhain. There is an old blessing found in fragments of ancient texts whispered whenever a candle was lit on All Hallows Eve. May the fire remember you. A simple wish, but one carrying the strength of all human memory. That the only way to overcome darkness is not through fear, but through remembrance. Today, when millions of homes glow orange at the end of October, few realize they are repeating an ancient ritual. Yet every candle, every pumpkin lantern, every flicker of light cutting through the night still carries the breath of those old Celtic fires. That light has travelled across millennia, through faith, through oceans, through change, but its message remains the same. Light the fire when night falls. And when the candles replaced the fires on the hills, when the ancient Celts became the people of medieval Europe, Halloween entered a new chapter, no longer just a festival of light, but a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest truths, our fears, our faith, and our unending compassion. History often changes with thunder, wars, inventions, revolutions, but sometimes the most enduring transformations arrive in silence. Halloween is one of those. It wasn't imposed or declared. It simply happened, like a season returning on schedule. Throughout the Middle Ages, as stone churches rose across Europe and bells called the faithful to prayer, Halloween quietly persisted in the rhythm of village life. It was no longer purely Samhain, yet not entirely All Hallows Eve either. It stood somewhere in between, a bridge between myth and faith. People still lit candles on their doorsteps, still sang souling songs, still left cakes for the dead. But they also attended church, listened to priests read Latin scriptures they barely understood, and sang hymns about salvation. In that soft candlelight, the old world and the sacred world merged. If we could travel back to a 13th century village in England or Ireland, we'd see it. Children carrying turnip lanterns, elders murmuring prayers, the hearth still glowing, someone at the doorway whispering to the departed. No one found contradiction in it. They didn't choose between old gods and the new faith. They simply lived and remembered. The evolution of Halloween didn't come from conflict, but from humanity's quiet need to hold on to connection, to keep what made them feel less alone. Whether it was gods or God, Samhain or All Saints' Day, the heart of it remained the same, the hope that death did not divide completely. The beauty of this era was that Halloween no longer belonged only to priests or churches. It became a celebration for everyone. A farmer, a widow, a child, each had a part to play. One lit a candle, one sang a song, one remembered. There was no hierarchy, only the equality of souls. Records from the 14th century tell of towns holding candle processions on All Hallows Eve. People walk through graveyards with torches, praying and telling stories, not only scripture but folk tales, ghost stories, tales of kind and wicked spirits. From these half-true, half-dreamed stories grew the roots of the modern Halloween, the moment when religion and imagination shook hands. The church gave people the idea of souls, and folklore gave those souls faces, names, and stories. Darkness was no longer only a symbol of sin. It became a place where memory lived. Children raised in that world learned two things: to pray for others and to fear. But a gentle kind of fear, the kind that teaches humility, the awareness that some things lie beyond human reach. From that, the feeling of Halloween was born. That fragile space between fear and wonder, between death and life. The silence of All Hallows Eve became its own ritual, no longer loud like Samhain's roaring fires, yet still pulsing with the same heartbeat. When church bells struck midnight, people extinguished their lamps and sat for a moment in the dark, as if making room for the souls to pass. In that quiet, they might have understood what Halloween had been saying for centuries. That sometimes, to understand life, one must learn to listen to death. There was no proclamation marking Halloween's birth, no decree, no event. It simply became itself over centuries of wind, flame, candles, and memory. Each generation added something new, but the old never vanished. By the end of the Middle Ages, Halloween had become inseparable from European culture. Part sacred, part folk, part mystery, part comfort. A night where one could pray and tell ghost stories, believe in God and still fear the dark, mourn and smile in the same breath. No one knew that only a few centuries later those who carried this tradition would leave their homeland, bringing Halloween across the ocean to the New World. There, it would transform again. Yet its soul would remain unchanged, a night for humankind to look into the darkness and find within it a small, steady light of their own. And as the first ships carrying the Irish and the Scots set sail, they brought with them fire, candles, and the ancient stories of Samhain. Halloween was on the move once more, crossing the sea into a new land where its old memory would find a brand new face. There are memories that people don't just carry in their hearts. They carry them in their luggage. In the mid-19th century, when ships filled with immigrants left the ports of Ireland, Scotland, and England, carrying thousands who fled famine, poverty, and war, they brought with them something invisible: old songs, whispered prayers, and the memory of Halloween. On the decks of ships crossing the cold Atlantic, mothers told their children stories of Samhain, of ancestral spirits, of hilltop fires, and of soul cakes. Those stories, small as they were, became threads that tied them to the home they'd left behind. When night fell over the open sea, they looked up at the stars, the same constellations their ancestors had watched during Samhain nights long ago. And in that moment, they knew they hadn't left everything behind. When they reached America, they settled in the raw lands of New England, Pennsylvania, and the Midwest. There, among strange forests and unfamiliar fields, the immigrants built homes, planted crops, and revived their old traditions with whatever they had. When autumn came, when the leaves turned and the winds grew sharp, the memory of Halloween was lit once more. At first, Halloween in America was simple. There were no electric lights, no costumes, only families of Irish and Scottish descent gathering to tell ghost stories, light candles, and leave sweet bread for their ancestors. To them it wasn't a holiday, it was a way to keep their roots alive in a new world. But America was a land of blending. Every immigrant brought a piece of their culture, and over time, those pieces intertwined. The English All Hallows Eve met the German Harvest Festival, the Scottish ghost tales mingled with the Mexican Day of the Dead. Halloween became a tapestry woven from many threads, both ancient and new. The 19th century was also an age of profound transformation. The Industrial Revolution was turning small towns into sprawling cities. Oil lamps began to replace candles, yet people still kept their windows glowing on the night of October 31st. In the towns of New England, young people began dressing up and playing harmless tricks on neighbors, what they called Mischief Night, the first spark of the playful Halloween spirit we know today. And it was during this era that an immortal symbol was born, the jack-o'-lantern. In Ireland, people had long carved turnips into lanterns inspired by the legend of Jack the Smith, a man who tricked the devil and was condemned to wander between heaven and hell, carrying a burning coal inside a hollowed root. But in America, turnips were scarce, pumpkins were everywhere, round, soft, golden, and bright. Pumpkins were easier to carve, and when a candle was placed inside, they glowed with a warm, otherworldly light, radiant yet kind. And so, from a small folk tale, the pumpkin lantern became the eternal emblem of American Halloween. Across farms and porches, pumpkins lined up in rows, their lights flickering through the mist, children laughing in the distance, and the memory of Samhain, the fire in the dark, lived again in a new form. Gradually, Halloween grew beyond the immigrant communities. Americans of every background, Germans, Dutch, English, found something familiar in it. The joy of harvest's end, the remembrance of the dead, and the thrill of stepping outside the boundaries of everyday life. By the late 19th century, American newspapers began referring to it as an autumn celebration. Schools held costume parties, towns organized parades, and adults played light-hearted games of fortune. To see who might marry, who might find luck, who might change their fate. No one called it Samhain anymore, but in every candle's flame, in every smile, there was still a reflection of that ancient hill fire. The miracle of Halloween was that it never lost its essence, even after crossing an ocean. In Ireland, it was memory. In America, it became possibility. In the Old World, people lit candles to remember the dead. In the New World, they lit them to celebrate life. Both were true, because Halloween was never just about death. It was always about continuity. In the New World, Halloween blossomed with diversity. It no longer belonged solely to religion, but became a cultural ritual, a night where everyone could find a piece of themselves, fear, joy, remembrance, or simply the freedom to become someone else for an evening. And so, with the sound of the Atlantic waves behind them and the glow of pumpkin light across the fields, Halloween entered its next chapter, the American chapter. A chapter of bustling towns and glowing windows, of candy instead of soul cakes, of lamplight instead of bonfires. But before it could become the colorful celebration we know today, Halloween still had one more transformation ahead, a crossroads between memory and merriment, between tradition and modernity. By the closing sales of the 19th century, America had become a very different place from the one the Irish had left behind. Here, autumn was not merely the end of a harvest, but the promise of a new beginning. Small towns rose along the railways, golden fields stretched to the horizon, and within each immigrant community, the memory of Halloween found a new form. No longer just a longing for home, but a part of their new life. In the farms of the North and Midwest, Halloween blended naturally with the harvest season. Leaves drifted across the hills, baskets of red apples sat on porches, and bundles of dried corn hung beside warm hearths. Americans called this the harvest season, a time for gratitude, gathering, and storytelling by firelight. Halloween, born from Samhain, the festival of endings and beginnings, fit seamlessly into this rhythm, as if it had always belonged to this land. The Irish told their American neighbors ghost stories, souling songs and the legend of Jack, the wandering soul carrying a glowing lantern through the fog. Americans, drawn to myth and imagination, embraced it eagerly. They added humor and playfulness, and thus American Halloween was born, with ghosts and witches, but also laughter and joy. In small towns, people began hosting Halloween parties, simple but warm gatherings under the glow of oil lamps. They played light-hearted fortune-telling games, tossing apple peels over their shoulders to divine a lover's name, gazing into mirrors at midnight to glimpse a future spouse, or floating candles on water to see what luck the coming year might bring. Half superstition, half innocence, these little games made Halloween a night both mysterious and romantic. Children, the soul of every celebration, began to dress up. At first, it was nothing more than old scarves, tattered hats, or cardboard masks. Yet, in the imagination of youth, they became ghosts, witches, or Jack-o'-lantern himself come to life. They wandered from house to house, knocking on doors for apple pies, molasses candy, or simply to startle a neighbor for fun. The adults didn't scold. They laughed and began preparing sweets in advance. Gradually, this turned into the custom we now know as trick or treat, a game, yes, but also a living echo of the old souling tradition, asking, sharing, connecting. Meanwhile, women's magazines and newspapers of the early 20th century began publishing guides on how to host a Halloween party. People decorated their homes with autumn leaves, pumpkins and candles, baked apple pies, and invited neighbors over. Halloween, once a night of spirits and the dead, became a symbol of connection, a time for people, in an increasingly industrial and hurried world, to pause, gather, and remember they still belonged to one another. Yet Halloween never lost its mischievous heart. In many towns, teenagers still played pranks, swapping fences, hiding wagons, knocking on doors and running away. Their antics led churches and schools to organize supervised celebrations, transforming what was once a night of spirits into a festival of joy. As America entered the 20th century, Halloween was no longer an immigrant's holiday. It had become distinctly American, a celebration of imagination and harmony between past and present. In every region it took on its own color. In New England, pumpkin lanterns glowed on wooden steps. In the South, ghost stories were told on porch swings. In the West, children ran laughing through autumn streets. The wonder of it all was that even as Halloween drifted far from its Celtic roots, it never lost its soul. It remained a night of remembrance. No longer a religious rite, yet still a pause in time when people could feel the quiet pulse of life moving through the dark. When the leaves fell and the wind turned cold, when orange lights glimmered through the night, there was still something ancient in the air. A whisper, a memory, a gentle reminder that life gains its meaning only when we learn to bow before the dark. Halloween in America became the sum of 1,000 years of memory. From the fires of Samhain to the candles of medieval Europe, to the pumpkin lights glowing on the wooden porches of New England. And here it would keep changing, becoming a mirror of the modern world where fear, imagination, and joy burn together in a single flame. When the first Halloween night ended and the children came home, a few candles still flickered on the table. A mother bent down, blew them out, and smiled softly. "That's it," she whispered. "But you see, tonight everything seemed alive again." And she was right. Halloween had come alive once more, and it will keep living every time humanity needs a reason to remember that we can still fear, still love, and still believe in what is mysterious. In every celebration, there's always a figure onto whom people project their fears, their hopes, and a bit of their mischief. For Halloween, that figure is Jack-o'-lantern, the wanderer with a light belonging neither to the world of the living nor the realm of the dead. He roams between two worlds, his flame faint but never extinguished. That is why they call him Jack of the Lantern. The story begins long ago in misty Ireland, among foggy taverns and cobblestone roads slick with rain. There lived a man known as Stingy Jack, a trickster, a liar, and a man so silver-tongued he could outwit anyone, even the devil himself. One night, Jack met the devil in a tavern. He invited him for a drink, but when the time came to pay, Jack refused. "You can turn into anything, can't you?" he said. "Then turn into a coin so I can pay the tab, and once I've paid, you can change back." The devil laughed and did as asked, but Jack slipped the coin into his pocket, where he kept a small silver cross. Trapped by the holy symbol, the devil couldn't escape. Jack made him promise not to claim his soul for 10 years. The devil, humiliated, agreed. 10 years later, the devil returned to collect his due. Jack saw him on the lonely road and smiled slyly. "I'll go with you," he said, "but could you fetch me one last apple from that tree?" When the devil climbed the tree, Jack carved a cross into the trunk, trapping him again. Jack then made him swear never to take his soul, not ever, no matter what. The devil, fuming, had no choice but to promise. Eventually Jack died. When he reached the gates of heaven, God looked upon him and said, "You lived a life of deceit and greed. There is no place for you here." So Jack turned to hell, but the devil, true to his word, barred him from entry. "You made a fool of me twice," the devil said. "Now you'll wander forever in the dark." Jack begged for a little light to guide his way. The devil threw him a burning coal from the fires of hell. Jack found a hollow turnip, placed the coal inside and began to walk through the night, through the void, between worlds. And from that moment he became Jack of the Lantern. Jack-o'-lantern. The legend spread throughout Ireland. Every Samhain night people carved turnips and placed candles inside to remind themselves of Jack's lost soul, the man who belonged nowhere yet carried an undying flame. When the Irish left their homeland for America, they carried his story with them. In the New World, turnips were scarce, but pumpkins were everywhere, bright, round, and golden, symbols of the harvest. And so the humble pumpkin became Jack's new lantern. When the first pumpkin lights glowed across American porches, they did more than brighten the Halloween night. They retold an old story about humanity itself, about mistakes, redemption, and the light that survives the dark. For if you look closer, Jack-o'-lantern is more than a folk tale. He is the spirit of Halloween, a soul denied salvation, yet refusing to disappear. The flame inside the pumpkin is the flame of memory. It reminds us that even when lost, we keep walking. Even when cast aside, we still guard a spark, small but steadfast. That is the meaning of Jack's story. Within each of us lives a piece of him, lost but still burning. And so, every Halloween night, millions of pumpkin lights flicker across the world. Each one is a quiet reminder that we, too, are wanderers, moving through the dark, through life, through the unknown, still carrying a fragile glow in our hands. The soul of Jack, the eternal wanderer, has travelled farther than his legend. From the taverns of ancient Ireland, he became the beating heart of modern Halloween, a symbol of memory, forgiveness, and the human longing to be remembered. But Halloween is not only the story of one wandering soul, it is also the story of an entire world in motion, of America entering the 20th century, where an ancient ritual became a shared culture, a night when people of every kind could gather beneath the orange light and for a moment feel alive together. When America stepped into the 20th century, Halloween had already left behind the misty, rain-soaked fields of Ireland. It had crossed the ocean and bloomed like a season of its own across this new land. Here, where every nation met, where every faith found a place, and where every memory blended together, Halloween became something that no longer belonged to any one people. It belonged to everyone. The industrial towns of America at that time were a loud, restless symphony, the whistle of trains, the rumble of looms, the ringing of church bells, the calls of street vendors echoing through smoky streets. Amid all that clamor, people still needed one night to stop, to breathe, to remember. And Halloween answered that need, not through solemn rituals, but through imagination. In the immigrant neighborhoods of Boston, Chicago, and New York, people began hanging glowing pumpkins in their windows, cutting out black cats, bats, and smiling witches from paper. At first, everything was handmade, scraps of cardboard, bits of candle wax, old twine. But soon, companies like Denison Manufacturing saw the charm and potential of this growing festival. They began printing postcards, crafting masks, decorations, and party supplies, turning Halloween into a bright orange industry. Yet the real magic of Halloween wasn't in business or profit, it was in connection. Across neighborhoods, doors opened, small gatherings filled the air, and children went from house to house, asking for sweets. In a society divided by race, religion, and class, Halloween became one of the few moments when everyone stood equal. Anyone could wear a costume, anyone could laugh, anyone could forget who they were for a while. When Italians, Poles, Germans, Jews, and Mexicans all celebrated Halloween, it became a harmony of colors and cultures. The Mexicans brought Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, with sugar skulls and bright marigolds. The Germans brought Walpurgisnacht, the springtime night of witches and wind. Native Americans added their storytelling around the fire, and the English preserved the old souling songs for the departed. All of it blended together, layer upon layer, like memories stacked upon memories. That is why Halloween in America has never had just one face. It carries the warm orange glow of pumpkins, the dark shadow of spirits, the laughter of children, and the faint breath of ancient souls. It is the one night when the living and the dead, the rich and the poor, the immigrant and the native, all share the same air. In schools, Halloween became a day for children to tell stories, perform plays, and express their creativity. In churches, it was reinterpreted as a night of remembrance and gratitude. In small towns, it marked the end of harvest. In big cities, it was a chance to shed the roles of daily life. America, the great melting pot, had cooked Halloween into something new, blending things that once seemed impossible to unite. The ancient Samhain, the sacred All Hallows Eve, the solemn souling, the wandering jack-o'-lantern, the mischievous trick-or-treat, all revolved around the same center, the memory of being human. But that blending also changed Halloween's nature. What began as a night of remembrance became a night of celebration, of imagination, of freedom, of humanity's ability to laugh at the dark and not be afraid. And perhaps that's why Halloween fits so naturally with America, a young country, always reinventing itself, always turning the old into something new. By the 1920s and 1930s, Halloween had become a national phenomenon. Schools hosted costume parades, newspapers printed photos of children marching through town, and whole neighborhoods glowed in orange light. Somewhere in that glow, you could still hear the faint echo of Samhain's ancient fire, but now it burned in the rhythm of a new century, lively, modern, full of life. And yet, amid the laughter and color, one quiet moment remained. On the night of October 31st, when the parties were over and the streets had grown still, someone, somewhere, would light a single candle by the window for a father, a mother, or a loved one long gone. A small gesture, but one that held the soul of Halloween itself. No matter how much it changes, it will always be the night of memory and light. As America moved into the modern age, Halloween would grow beyond neighborhood porches and small-town gatherings. It would step into films, music, literature, and into homes shining with electric lights at the end of every October. But before that transformation, Halloween had to pass through one more shadow, the dark years of war and the Great Depression, when the world nearly forgot how to smile at the night. There are moments in history when the world seems to forget how to feel joy. When smoke fills the air, when sirens cry through the night, when fear becomes a language everyone understands, people no longer have time for glowing pumpkins on porches or the laughter of children running through the streets. Yet even in those dark years, Halloween, once a festival for the spirits, proved that the smallest light can still survive the deepest shadow. In the 1930s, America sank into the Great Depression. Factories closed, workers stood in long lines for bread, and a grey film of dust settled over everything. Autumn, once the season of harvest, became a season of worry. Families had no money for candy and little heart for celebration. But in small towns, something tender still happened. On the night of October 31st, children went from door to door, not to ask for sweets, but to tell stories, to hear ghost tales, to borrow a little warmth from the living. Adults, though weary and poor, smiled. They knew the children needed Halloween, needed one night where the world felt normal again, even if only through imagination. Some carved pumpkins with dull knives, lighting them with leftover candles from the church. "That's bright enough," they would whisper. In those hard years, that tiny flicker on the porch became a luxury, a quiet symbol of hope. Then came war, and the world burned once more. In 1939, bombs fell across Europe. By 1941, America entered the Second World War. Streetlights went out, windows were sealed, gasoline and sugar were rationed, and for a time, Halloween disappeared. No jack-o'-lanterns, no costumes, no laughter. Fear had swallowed everything. But human beings cannot live in darkness forever. At military bases, soldiers found ways to keep the spirit alive. They painted faces with coal, made lanterns from tin cans, told ghost stories between the roars of planes. For a moment, they remembered that there was still a world beyond the war. Back home, mothers baked what little they could, setting small pumpkins on the table for their children, and for the husbands who were far away. In letters sent across the ocean, they wrote about those tiny lights, calling them the candles of hope. One woman wrote, "If you're still out there somewhere, know that I'm still lighting the lantern." Tonight is Halloween, and the fire still burns. When the war finally ended in 1945, America was tired but alive. Soldiers came home, cities lit up again, children filled the streets. And in that season of rebuilding, Halloween was reborn. Stronger, brighter, more human. People needed to laugh again, to believe again, to feel that those who were lost had not vanished in vain. Towns organized parades, trucks decorated with pumpkins and witches rolled through the streets, radios played ghost stories, and newspapers called Halloween the night of memory and rebirth. Out of the ashes of war, it became something new. Not a religious ritual, but a celebration of life, imagination, and community. Candy companies like Hershey and Mars introduced small, colorful treats made especially for Halloween. They replaced the old soul cakes, but carried the same message, the joy of giving. From this came a new phrase, cheerful and simple, trick or treat. It was no longer a prayer, but a song of laughter. Instead of asking for blessings for the dead, children asked for candy. Instead of whispering solemn prayers, they laughed. Yet beneath the laughter, the spirit remained the same. People still shared, still connected, still kept the flame of memory alive. By the 1950s, as America stepped into an age of prosperity, Halloween became the holiday of childhood. Cartoons, magazines, and television glowed with smiling ghosts, black cats, and bright orange pumpkins. It was louder, more colorful, and more commercial than ever. But somewhere beneath all that glitter, the old soul still lived. The soul of those who once lit candles in wartime, who carved pumpkins out of scraps, who believed that even a faint light could guide the way. And perhaps that is the true magic of Halloween. Not in the masks or the candy, but in its quiet defiance of despair. Through poverty, through war, through every darkness of history, it has endured. Every time humanity loses its way, Halloween returns. Not to banish the dark, but to remind us how to smile within it. After long years of war, America entered what people called the Decade of Light. Cities glowed with neon signs, new suburbs sprouted like wildflowers, families bought their first televisions, and children ran through wide, quiet streets with eyes full of wonder at a world reborn with promise. In that atmosphere, Halloween didn't just return, it was reborn, a symbol of childhood, memory, and imagination. In those new neighborhoods, Halloween became the thread that tied communities together. Each autumn, families decorated porches with glowing pumpkins, hung fake cobwebs, and placed paper witches by the door. When night fell, children walked in cheerful clusters, holding baskets and calling out, "Trick or treat!" and the whole neighborhood laughed together. It wasn't just about candy, it was about belonging. The biggest change of this era came with television. For the first time, Halloween appeared on screen. Animated specials like It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, 1966, and Halloween-themed episodes from Disney and Looney Tunes made the entire country look forward to October 31st. On those black and white screens, costumed children, glowing jack-o'-lanterns, and friendly ghosts became the new symbols of American childhood. Halloween also entered music. The song Monster Mash, 1962, echoed across the country, funny, spooky, and irresistibly catchy. Costume parties spread from schools to offices, from churches to grand ballrooms. Halloween became both nostalgic and modern, light-hearted, mischievous, and full of laughter. Yet, even as it grew brighter, Halloween never lost its shadow. Behind the laughter and orange lights lingered something fragile, a quiet reminder of what it means to be human, to live with both fear and courage. For one night each year, people could become ghosts, witches, or monsters, not to escape fear, but to make peace with it. During this time, the costume industry exploded. Stores filled with paper masks, nylon capes, and plastic outfits featuring every popular figure of the day. Classic monsters like Dracula and Frankenstein shared space with Mickey Mouse and Superman. Children dressed as their heroes, adults put on disguises to shed their daily roles, and for one night, everyone was equal, united by fear, joy, and play. In rural towns, the old traditions endured. Families held hay rides through dry autumn fields, told ghost stories under the moon, bobbed for apples, and carved giant pumpkins for contests. In cities, Halloween became more dazzling. Parades filled the streets, costume parties filled ballrooms, and the first horror movies flickered in dark theaters. What made Halloween in the 1950s through the 1970s legendary was its sense of community. It was a time when neighbors trusted each other, when children could wander door to door freely, and when every porch light felt like a welcome. The soft glow of street lamps, the crunch of dry leaves, and the laughter drifting through cool autumn air became the soundscape of a generation. For many Americans, those memories lasted a lifetime. Halloween wasn't just a holiday, it was a picture of childhood itself, a world still simple, where fear was only a game, and the light of a pumpkin could chase away every shadow. But every golden age fades. By the late 1970s, America had changed. Cities grew restless, crime rose, the Vietnam War and the counterculture movement reshaped the nation, and the innocence that once defined suburban life began to dissolve. Halloween, once the symbol of safety and childhood, took on new colors, darker, deeper, more honest. In 1978, director John Carpenter released Halloween. That single film became a turning point, not only defining the slasher genre, but also ushering Halloween into a new era of grown-up fear. From that moment, Halloween was no longer just a children's holiday. It became a mirror of adult anxieties, a night that reflected the unease of a changing America. And as the soft flicker of pumpkins spread beyond the front porches of American homes to every corner of the world, Halloween stepped through a new door, leaving behind the age of light and laughter, and entering the age of cinema and imagination, where fear became art and death became a story worth telling. When the screen lights up in a dark theater and the first eerie notes echo through the room, people know that Halloween has entered a new world, the world of cinema. Thousands of years ago, the fire of Samhain burned on distant hills to guide wandering souls. Today, that same light flickers from movie screens, a different kind of fire, one made of images, sounds, and collective imagination. The 1970s were a time when America began to look at itself. After war, after social division, after wounds that had yet to heal. In that setting, Halloween, once a symbol of childhood and community, became a mirror reflecting the darker side of modern America. In 1978, director John Carpenter released a small, independent film called Halloween. With a modest budget of just $300,000, it changed forever the way people understood fear. The story seemed simple. A quiet suburban town haunted by a masked killer, Michael Myers, who escapes a sanitarium and returns home on Halloween night to bring death with him. There were no demons, no magic, only humanity and the darkness within it. That was what made Halloween a cultural earthquake. The film showed that true horror doesn't come from the world beyond. It lives right here, in familiar houses, on quiet streets, behind the faces we trust. The film's success gave birth to a whole new genre, the Halloween horror film, where the glow of a pumpkin illuminated the face of evil, where celebration and terror became two sides of the same soul. In its wake came an entire pantheon: Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, Trick or Treat, each adding another layer to the mythology of modern Halloween, each exploring the same question: what happens when we confront the darkness inside ourselves? And yet, beneath all the screaming and the blood, something ancient remained. Whether they realized it or not, filmmakers were still telling the first story of Halloween, the story of the fragile border between life and death, of memories that never fade, and of a small light standing against endless night. If you look closely, every Halloween film, no matter how gory, romantic, supernatural, or human, carries one recurring image: the jack-o'-lantern. Its flame still burns, quietly reminding us that we remember. Because no matter how the world changes, Halloween keeps whispering the same message. Darkness is only frightening when no one dares to face it. At the same time, Hollywood turned Halloween into a universal language. Filmmakers from Europe, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Mexico, and beyond began using Halloween's imagery to tell their own stories of fear. Fear of loneliness, of loss, of being forgotten. Through that, Halloween transcended America and became a symbol of humanity's shared memory, a canvas on which every culture could paint its own ghosts. On screen, Halloween took countless forms: a child gazing at a glowing pumpkin and remembering a lost father, a restless spirit unable to leave the world of the living, a young woman conquering fear to find herself again. All are variations of the same myth: the journey through darkness to rediscover the light. By the 1990s and 2000s, Halloween was no longer just one night. It had become a season. Studios released waves of horror films every October. TV channels hosted all-night scare marathons. Theme parks opened Halloween horror nights where people paid to be frightened, to scream, to laugh, to release their fears in a place where the darkness was safe. The irony of seeking fear for comfort perfectly captured the philosophy of Halloween itself: to face death in order to understand life. On a deeper level, Halloween in modern culture became a kind of secular ritual, a way for a world with fewer gods to still touch the invisible. It became a bridge between faith and art, between ancestral memory and the present, between fear and creativity, a space where darkness is allowed to exist without harming anyone. When the theatre lights fade and the words "the end" appear, the audience walks out into the cool night. The streetlights cast half of each face in gold and leave the other half in shadow, just like Halloween has done for humanity for thousands of years. In the end, fear is not the enemy. It is the mirror that reminds us we are still alive, still feeling. Halloween on screen accomplished what Samhain once did. It made humanity look into the darkness and not turn away. And from the Celtic hills of fire to the sound stages of Hollywood, that flame has never gone out. It has only changed color, from the red of embers, to the orange of pumpkins, to the pale blue of the movie screen. But its meaning endures. The light of humanity never truly fades in the night. As the world began to shrink through television, the internet, and the power of Hollywood films, Halloween left the leaf-strewn streets of America and set out on a global journey. A festival once born on the misty hills of the Celts, once reborn in the small towns of New England, now appeared everywhere, from Tokyo to Berlin, from Mexico City to Hanoi. And strangely enough, though each place celebrates it differently, Halloween has kept its original soul, the light within the darkness. In Japan, Halloween is more than just costumes and candy. The celebration blends naturally with the ancient spirit of Obon Matsuri, Japan's festival of honoring ancestors. On October nights, the streets of Shibuya and Osaka transform into oceans of ghosts, anime characters, and witches, yet amid the noise and neon, some still pause to light incense before temple gates, whispering prayers for their ancestors. The balance between quiet reverence and joyful chaos makes Japanese Halloween a thing of fragile beauty, a festival where fear, respect, and delight coexist, where people smile at the very things that haunt them. In Mexico, Halloween intertwines with Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. But here, death isn't frightening. It's celebrated with marigolds, sugar, chocolate, and the music of mariachi bands echoing through candlelit streets. Families build ofrendas, altars filled with photos, sweetbreads, and offerings for loved ones who have passed. To them, Halloween is not a night of demons, but a night of remembrance and gratitude. The candles of Mexico burn brighter than anywhere else, because there, the darkness is not an enemy, but a companion. In England and Ireland, the homeland of Samhain, modern Halloween feels like a circle completed. People still light bonfires, now in city parks. Children still knock on doors, now with candy bags instead of prayers. On wind-swept fields, old Gaelic stories are told to remind everyone that Halloween was never an American invention, but a wandering child returning home. The elders tell of Jack-o'-lantern, of the hilltop fires, and of how their ancestors once called to the spirits in the wind. In Germany, Halloween arrived late, after the fall of the Berlin Wall. At first, the German sense of order dismissed it as a childish fad. But soon, when cities began hosting costume parades and young people filled the streets with lanterns and beer, Halloween became a celebration of freedom, a way of saying, we have escaped the darkness. Perhaps that's why Halloween in Germany always carries a trace of melancholy, a thoughtful undertone, as if every laugh still echoes faintly with the memory of division. In Vietnam, Halloween is a newcomer, but it has been embraced with curiosity and creativity. In recent years, city streets glow with pumpkin lanterns, cafes and schools hold costume contests. Under the amber lights, with music playing and faces painted white, Halloween takes on a uniquely Vietnamese charm, modern yet poetic. No one speaks of Samhain or All Hallows Eve, but something deeply human still lingers. The desire to transform, to play, to feel, to believe that even the night can be beautiful. And in all these places, Tokyo, Mexico City, Dublin, Berlin, Hanoi, one thing remains the same: light. Whether it's from candles, lanterns, LEDs, or phone screens, humanity still lights up the night of October 31st. Because Halloween has never truly been about demons. It has always been about people, about memories, persistence, about our ability to turn fear into art and sorrow into joy. The miracle of global Halloween lies in this. It has not lost its identity. It has adapted to survive. Each country adds its own voice. In America, laughter and candy. In Mexico, flowers and remembrance. In Japan, light and discipline. In Europe, nostalgia. In Asia, reinvention. Yet within millions of glowing pumpkins around the world, the same flame burns. The flame of Jack, of Samhain, of our ancestors. Halloween has traveled from sacred ritual to pop culture, from myth to cinema, from rural fields to digital worlds. But one thing remains unchanged. It makes us pause, even for a single night, to remember that we can still feel. The 21st century moves fast, and Halloween changes with it. More virtual, more vivid, more global. But the more modern it becomes, the more it must protect the quiet heartbeat that has kept it alive for thousands of years. That still moment within the light, where the living and the spirits can still meet. As the world stepped into the 21st century, Halloween transformed once again. No longer just the fire on a Celtic hill or a pumpkin glowing on an American porch. Its light now shines from millions of screens, phones, TVs, laptops, billboards, and the eyes staring into them. The ancient fire of Samhain has found a new shape in the digital age. On social media, Halloween begins long before the night itself. By early October, costumes flood Instagram, short horror clips fill TikTok, and ghost stories told in synthetic voices drift endlessly through scrolling feeds. It's a glowing virtual world where every swipe replaces the footsteps once taken down misty village roads, and every emoji becomes a quiet greeting between two souls, one human, one memory. Some say Halloween has lost its sacred touch, but perhaps it hasn't vanished. It's simply shifted. The true heart of Halloween was never about fear or fun, but connection. Long ago, people lit fires to feel less alone in the dark. Today, they post a photo, a pumpkin emoji, or a small message that means the same thing. I'm still here. I still remember. In this digital space, Halloween has become a collective memory replayed each year. Brands launch campaigns, musicians drop new songs, filmmakers release horror trailers, gamers host spooky in-game events. People wear virtual costumes through filters, candles with emojis, and tell ghost stories in 30-second videos. It might sound artificial, yet real moments still flicker through, like when someone lights an actual candle by their window and whispers to the camera, "For the one who's gone." Even in a digital world, we can't escape the old symbols. 3D pumpkins, digital masks, survival games inspired by Samhain. They all point to the same truth. Halloween never dies. It just changes its language to keep telling its story. In video games, players still reenact the ancient ritual, facing death, crossing the dark, and finding their way back to light. In the movies that play all October, when audiences scream and laugh together, they're unknowingly reviving the same ancient spirit, confronting fear as a way to remember they're alive. There's something beautiful about it. Millions of phones glowing on the night of October 31st, each one like a tiny jack-o'-lantern. Outside, the world may be loud, but that glow creates a hush, a formless sense of connection where people everywhere share the same quiet moment, a fire that no longer needs wood, only a touch. The virtual world hasn't killed tradition, it has made it portable. Halloween, humanity's memory of the border between worlds, has become a living memory itself, drifting between the real and the digital. Some light candles, others light screens, but both are saying the same thing: the darkness is still here, and so is our light. And within this digital realm, Halloween has rediscovered its first purpose: to pause. Amid deadlines, notifications, and endless scrolling, one night each year reminds us of what we often forget: death, memory, fear, courage, and the beauty of impermanence. Not because we still believe in ghosts, but because we still believe in emotion. The world may change how it celebrates, but the meaning remains. In a photo, in a story, or in the soft glow of a screen at midnight. Halloween has become a digital mirror of the human soul, our endless attempt to retell an old story with new tools, so we never forget that we were once creatures who could both fear and love. And so, from the fires on ancient hills to the light of global screens, Halloween has come full circle. The fire of Samhain now burns in billions of pixels, yet it carries the same message whispered across the ages. No matter how much the world changes, we still need one night to remember that we can bring light into the dark. Perhaps the strangest thing about Halloween isn't how much it has changed from a Celtic ritual to a global festival, but the fact that it has never disappeared. Civilizations have fallen, religions have shifted, traditions have faded into dust, and yet this one night, the night when people light up the darkness, keeps returning year after year, like the steady heartbeat of human memory. Halloween has survived not because it is fun, and not because it is frightening, but because it touches something ancient and unshakable within us: memory. Since the beginning of time, humankind has known that life is short, but memory is long. People lit fires not only to chase away spirits, but to hold on to the faces of those who had gone. They built altars, baked bread, hung lanterns, wore masks. All different languages for the same truth: we do not forget. Even as we change languages, wear different clothes, and live in a world of electricity and airplanes, we still need a ritual to face what cannot be avoided: disappearance. Memory is humanity's only way to resist time. And at its deepest level, Halloween is the ritual of remembrance. It reminds us that death is not an ending, but a continuation, a life that lingers in the minds of others. Every candle, every pumpkin light, every story told in the night is not about fear. It's about keeping someone's presence alive. If Samhain was once the doorway between two worlds, then modern Halloween is the doorway between two moments, between past and present, between who we were and who we are. We don't just dress as ghosts and witches, we dress up to be someone else for a night, to touch a part of ourselves we've forgotten. Behind every mask might be someone remembering a loved one, or simply someone longing to feel real again, even for a few hours. When we look closely at Halloween, we can see a kind of small cycle of rebirth, not of souls, but of meaning. Samhain died so that All Hallows Eve could live. All Hallows Eve changed shape so that modern Halloween could be born. And someday, this Halloween will evolve again to tell the same story in another form. It has never been a festival of religion, but a festival of collective memory, of humanity's ability to retell one truth through thousands of generations, in thousands of voices. On the night of October 31st, no matter where you are, in a bright apartment or a quiet alley, the world seems to slow down for a while. Something softens, becomes hazy, and people look at each other differently. It's no longer an ordinary day. We are no longer just busy humans. For a moment, we are souls, lighting fires for one another, through candy, through laughter, through stories. Halloween exists because we are afraid of forgetting, and that fear is what keeps memory alive. When we forget, not only do the dead vanish, but a part of us disappears too. Perhaps that's why Halloween always feels slightly bittersweet. Beneath the laughter of children and the glow of orange lights, there's always a chill in the air, a quiet ache like the breath of the old Celtic hills. Because within every laugh, humanity is whispering to the dark, "I remember you. I have not forgotten." Halloween doesn't just teach us to accept death. It teaches us to honor memory, to look at impermanence without fear. And in doing so, it teaches us how to love life, in its fragility, in its brevity, in every fleeting moment that could vanish at any time. That is the power of all rituals, to help us remember who we are. Even without druid temples, without stone churches, even with Samhain reduced to pages in a book, Halloween endures. Not because it needs to exist, but because we need it to exist. And when the night passes, when the jack-o'-lanterns go dark and the wax cools, when laughter fades into the fog, Halloween returns to where it has always lived, in human memory. A short night, yet long enough to remind all of humanity of one truth. No darkness lasts forever, as long as someone keeps a light burning. Since the beginning of time, humanity has feared the dark, not because there was something terrifying within it, but because there was nothing at all, no shape, no boundary, no light to hold on to. And in that emptiness, imagination began its restless work, turning every sound and shadow into demons, spirits, and nameless fears. Yet strangely, humankind never truly tried to destroy the darkness. Instead, we learned to place a small flame at its center. And from that simple act, Halloween was born, a ritual that teaches us to look at what we fear without running from it. In both ancient cultures and Western philosophy, darkness has never been merely the absence of light. It is an essential half of existence. Without night, we would never understand dawn. Without fear, we would never know courage. Without death, we would never grasp the value of each breath. The Celts of Samhain understood this long ago. They did not fight against the dark. They invited it in through fire, through stories, through reverence. Because only when we welcome our fear does it cease to be our enemy. In the modern world, darkness no longer lives in forests or graveyards. It lives within us, in our weakness, our loss, our hidden truths. When we wear costumes and masks, we are touching that shadow, not to conceal it, but to recognize it. For one night each year, we are allowed to become our own fear and smile at it. That is why Halloween continues to resonate across generations, even as its form evolves. Children fear ghosts, adults fear loneliness, the elderly fear being forgotten, but beneath them all lies one shared fear, the fear of disappearing. And somehow, Halloween helps us make peace with that. In the soft orange glow of a jack-o'-lantern, we see our own shadows stretch long, imperfect, uncertain, yet undeniably there. The darkness is no longer the enemy. It becomes the backdrop that gives light its meaning. As the poet Rilke once said, perhaps all the monsters in us are simply things waiting to be loved. Halloween does not ask us to fear. It invites us to live with fear. Not to banish it, not to conquer it, but to face it gently as a natural part of being human. If light symbolizes reason, then darkness is the realm of intuition, emotion, and memory. The things that keep us human, that keep us from becoming machines. Every jack-o'-lantern burning in the night is a quiet declaration. I know the darkness is here, but I choose to light my candle anyway. Not to drive the night away, but to share space with it, calmly, deliberately. That is the unspoken philosophy at the heart of Halloween, from the ancient hills of Samhain to the digital world of today. One night a year, we play with death, with fear, with the unseen, so that when the sun rises, we can live more fully, more gratefully. Fear, when seen through the eyes of awareness, is not the enemy. It is a mirror reflecting the parts of ourselves we have yet to understand. The Celts knew this when they called Samhain the night of truth, because only in darkness, when the noise of the world fades, can we hear the voice within. And perhaps that is why Halloween never grows old. In this age of constant light and glowing screens, we still need one night to turn everything off, to sit with real darkness, the kind that lives inside the soul. There, in that quiet, we see ourselves most clearly. When we understand the meaning of darkness, we finally understand why Halloween has lasted for thousands of years. It was never a celebration of ghosts, but of acceptance, that light and shadow together make us whole. And when we stop fearing one half of who we are, life itself becomes complete. Since the moment humanity learned to make fire, we have known how to push back the night. Yet perhaps even earlier than that, we knew how to look into the flame and see it as something alive, a soul breathing in the dark. The Celts believed that on the night of Samhain, when the boundary between the worlds grew thin, fire was the only thing keeping humankind from getting lost in the darkness. They built great bonfires on the hills, not only to light the night, but to call their ancestors home, as if that glow itself were the breath of the departed. From then on, fire became the center of every ritual. When the flames flickered, they believed the living and the dead were speaking. The living sent unspoken words through the smoke, and the dead answered with warmth. No one needed to speak. Everyone simply knew. Within the fire lived memory. Through thousands of years, fire changed its form but never lost its soul. In the stone churches of the Middle Ages, it became the candle of prayer. In the Irish home, it was the small turnip lantern of jack-o'-lantern. And in the modern world, it burns softly within the orange glow of a pumpkin. Still alive, still reminding us of something ancient, that even in death, breath remains. Fire and breath have always been twins. One keeps the body alive, the other keeps memory alive. When we breathe, we sustain our life. When we light a flame, we sustain the life of remembrance. Perhaps that is why, beneath all the costumes and laughter, Halloween always holds one quiet moment when people light candles and watch the flame tremble. That moment belongs neither to fear nor to joy. It belongs to the continuation of life itself. Fire makes no distinction. It burns for the dead, for the living, and for those yet to be born. In its light, every boundary fades, between human and spirit, between past and present, between ourselves and the world. Staring into the flame, humankind realizes what philosophy has taken millennia to describe. Existence is not separation, it is continuity. When a candle burns, it is also dying, yet in that very act, it shines. So it is with us. Only when we know we are finite do we truly learn how to live. At its deepest level, Halloween is that reminder. A night when we look into the flame and see ourselves burning, breathing, existing within the vast rhythm of the universe. If you noticed, every symbol of Halloween carries the mark of breath, the flicker of a candle in the wind, laughter muffled behind a mask, the white mist of autumn air, the words "Happy Halloween" drifting from one person to another. All of them are signs of life in a night meant for the dead. The Celts believed that if a soul was forgotten, its flame would fade away, but Halloween ensures that never happens. Each year, even for a few hours, millions of candles are lit, and in their glow we remember faces, voices, the people who once walked beside us. It is as if fire itself breathes on behalf of memory. Today, in our electronic world, the flame may have changed form. It may be a lamp, a screen, a digital glow, but its essence remains the same. Humanity still reaches for warmth. Not the warmth of heat, but the warmth of emotion, of connection, of belonging. Halloween reminds us that sometimes a single small flame is enough to warm an entire night, and sometimes our fragile breath is the last flicker of another soul's eternal light. The Celts called it the eternal fire, the flame that never dies. No one knows where it began, and no one knows when it will end. But every year, as autumn winds return, people find ways to rekindle it. Through jack-o'-lanterns, through storytelling, through memory. And within every breath we take, Halloween lives on, not just as a festival, but as the shared heartbeat of humankind. Since the dawn of humankind, we have known how to make masks, not only to hide our faces, but to touch the invisible parts of ourselves. In Africa, a mask is a doorway between human and spirit. In Japan, the no mask turns an actor into the living soul of emotion. In ancient Greece, it allowed people to speak the truth without fear. And in the West, on the night of Samhain, later known as Halloween, the mask became a tool to walk between the world of the living and the dead. The Celts believed that on the last night of October, the spirits of the dead returned to the earth. To keep from being recognized and taken away, the living disguised themselves, turning into ghosts and demons to trick the wandering shadows. But perhaps beneath that fear of being captured, there was something deeper, the desire to transform. In everyday life, people are bound by the roles they play, yet for one night each year they are free to become anyone or anything. And in that pretending, something unexpectedly real emerges. That is the first paradox of Halloween. We wear masks to be more honest. When a child puts on a witch's hat, it isn't just make-believe, it's an exploration of power, of freedom, of daring to be different, to do what they can't when they are simply themselves. When an adult puts on the mask of a ghost, it may not be because they fear ghosts, but because they're facing their own grief, loss, the things they've never said aloud. A mask, then, doesn't just conceal, it reflects. It doesn't tell us who we are, it asks, who would you be if no one were watching? And so, amid music and light, Halloween becomes a stage of truth, a night where people play other roles only to understand their real ones. The shy become bold, the serious burst into laughter, the lonely turn into spirits among a crowd. And when the night ends, when the masks come off, something within them still glows, like a small jack-o'-lantern that has just been lit. In our modern world, where everyone already wears invisible masks, of work, of social media, of expectation, Halloween feels more necessary than ever. It's a quiet confession wrapped in celebration, that we all have sides we hide, yet still long to be seen, if only for one night. Maybe that's why the images of ghosts, demons, zombies, and witches no longer frighten us, because they're really mirrors of ourselves. Imperfect souls still learning how to live with what we don't yet understand. If fire is the breath of Halloween, then the mask is its face, allowing us to exist in between truth and illusion, between human and symbol. And the beauty of it is that in hiding, we end up seeing more. People say Halloween is a night of deception, of make-believe, of games. But perhaps it is the most truthful night of the year. Not because we don't know who anyone is, but because everyone is finally allowed to be whoever they wish to be. And in that freedom, judgment fades, leaving only connection. When the mask comes off, there's a strange feeling that lingers. Not relief exactly, but something like waking from a dream where you saw yourself differently and somehow more clearly. That perhaps is the purpose of every ritual. Not to escape, but to return. To return to what's real after walking through what's imagined. In that way, Halloween becomes a small personal ritual for the modern soul, a single night when we're allowed to look directly at what we hide and smile at it. Because once we dare to face what we fear most, it loses its power. That is the quiet purification Halloween offers, gentle, unspoken, but as deep as the final breath of fire. Masks will change with time, from paper to plastic, from digital filters to virtual reality, but their meaning never fades. They help us touch the soul we forget we have. And maybe that is the real magic of Halloween. We think we are pretending, but in truth, we are finding our way home. When Halloween night arrives, what we feel is not only the darkness, not only the fire, but time itself. That invisible current drifts between falling leaves, hides within the chill of the wind, and lies quietly in the sound of footsteps brushing across dry pavement. No one can see time, yet on nights like this, it feels present. Slow, gentle, almost kind. From its origin, Halloween has always been tied to the rhythm of the seasons. The Celtic festival of Samhain was not only a celebration of spirits, but a marker in the year, the close of harvest and the beginning of winter. It was a moment of reflection, to see what had been sown, what remained, and what must now rest. Between earth and sky, autumn and winter, life and death, in that fragile boundary, Halloween was born. The ancient Celts saw time not as a straight line, but as a circle. Each year they walked the same path, sowing, harvesting, resting, rebirth. Death was not an ending, but a pause that allowed life to begin again. And within that understanding, Halloween became something deeper. Not a night of fear, but a ritual of acceptance. In the modern world, we've forgotten how to treat time as a friend. We measure it, schedule it, chase it, and fear its passing. But Halloween, even for just one night, reminds us that time doesn't come to take away, It comes to return. It takes youth, but gives back memory. It steals old laughter, but offers wisdom in exchange. And within that quiet trade, we live, just as a flame continues to burn, even as the candle shortens. The ancients counted years by stars and moons. We count them now by streetlights and clocks. Yet Halloween, wherever and whenever it is celebrated, always falls at that same tender threshold when nature whispers, "The season has changed." The wind grows thinner, the days dim sooner, and the leaves dry to gold. Everything around us seems to say, "Listen." In the cool breath of October, we begin to remember, not only those we've lost, but the earlier versions of ourselves. The selves who once lit candles, who once laughed, once trembled, once believed. And in that memory, time stops being cruel. It becomes a storyteller, soft-voiced, patient, reminding us that nothing is truly lost, only changed in form. Halloween asks us to pause in a world that never stops. It's a rest note in the song of time, a moment when we don't rush, don't strive, but simply listen. Listen to the wind sliding past the roof. Listen to leaves crossing the road. Listen to your heartbeat slowing in the long night. And in that stillness, you realize that time isn't outside of you. It flows through you. Perhaps that is why Halloween has never been a memory of death, but a memory of motion. Every candle that burns marks a moment passing. Every child knocking on a door is a sign of renewal, a new generation stepping forward into the circle. Halloween connects all these loops, ancestor to descendant, old year to new, memory to now. If fire is the soul of Halloween, then time is its breath. Without time, memory would be still life. Because of time, memory lives. As Halloween lives again each year, repeating its shape, yet always carrying something new. And maybe that is Halloween's quiet miracle. It teaches us to pause in a world that never pauses. It reminds us that we are drifting, that all things are temporary, but it is their very impermanence that makes them precious. Without endings, we would never cherish beginnings. Without winter, we would never feel the warmth of fire. Halloween does not fight time, it walks with it. And in doing so, it endures longer than any empire or faith. Each year, when the night of October 31st returns, we step once more into the same story. Not to repeat it, but to remember that we can still hear the whisper of time. No other festival speaks of death with so much tenderness. Across thousands of years, Halloween has never truly been a night of demons or tricks. It has always been a night of remembrance, when people are allowed to remember, to love, and to say goodbye in ways that ordinary life does not permit. From the time of Samhain, the Celts believed that on the final night of October, the souls of the departed returned home. Not to haunt or harm, but simply to visit, to see their families again. People would clear the table, set out an extra bowl, an empty chair, and light a candle in the window. That little flame carried a quiet message. If you are still wandering, this is the way home. As the cold night settled in, families gathered around the fire to tell stories of those who were gone. No one wept. There was only the soft crackle of wood, the whisper of wind through the eaves. They believed the spirits could hear them. And in that stillness, the living and the dead drew closer than ever before. Over time, the customs changed, but the spirit remained. In Mexico, families still build ofrendas, altars with photos, marigolds, candles, and food. inviting ancestors to join the feast. In Europe, many still light jack-o'-lanterns for the departed. And in America, beneath the noise and color of modern Halloween, there are still moments of quiet, when someone lights a candle for a parent, a grandparent, or a lost friend. Because no matter how far humanity advances, we cannot escape one deep longing, the desire to remember and to be remembered. Existence only truly matters when it lives on in someone else's memory. And Halloween, in the simplest way, gives people a way to fulfill that, not through doctrine, but through gesture, a candle, a story, a glance toward the past. When a child places a candle inside a pumpkin, they may not understand that they are taking part in an ancient ritual. Yet that small act, even done unconsciously, carries a great meaning. It extends an invisible thread between generations. When the flame burns, the dead are remembered, and the living feel a little less alone. In that moment, death loses its absoluteness. It becomes a continuation, one phase in the larger flow of memory. The living do not beg for immortality. They only wish to preserve a trace of present in a story, a scent, a warmth left behind in the autumn air. And Halloween, more than any religion, allows this to happen softly, without judgment or ceremony, through light and silence. People often say, as long as you are remembered, you never truly die. Perhaps that is why even in its mystery, Halloween never feels despairing. The darkness it brings does not smell of endings. It smells of recollection, of burning wood, roasted pumpkin, dry leaves, and the gentle sadness of memory. In that air, people no longer fear death, because they understand that death is only a part of a story still being told. At its heart, Halloween reminds us of something the modern world forgets. Memory does not live in objects. It doesn't need gravestones or names carved in stone. It lives in small actions. When we remember, when we tell, when we live in ways that honor those who came before. It's no accident that Halloween arrives in autumn, the season of falling leaves, yet also of radiant gold. Like memory, life may fade, but before it disappears, it shines. Every candle lit that night is humanity's way of speaking to time. I have not forgotten. And as long as I remember, you still live within me. One day, each of us will become someone else's memory. In an old photograph, a familiar scent, or a quiet story told beside a Halloween fire. And perhaps the truest beauty is not to live forever, but to be remembered with love. Because Halloween does not teach us how to escape death. It teaches us how not to be forgotten. And perhaps that is the only immortality humankind has ever truly known. When night falls and the streets glow with amber light, you can hear the small footsteps echo through the neighborhood. Children, dressed as black cats, little ghosts, witches and superheroes, run from house to house, candy buckets swinging in their hands. Each burst of laughter flickers like a spark, glowing softly in the cool autumn air. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows it is the children who keep Halloween alive. When adults wear costumes, they remember, but when children wear them, they bring it back to life. In their eyes, Halloween is not a ritual. It's a world of possibility. A world where a girl can become a witch, a boy can turn into a mummy, and a group of friends can become spirits, both eerie and endearing. In that world, no one truly dies. only imagination is reborn. Perhaps that's why Halloween never grows old, though it has existed for thousands of years. Each year, as one generation fades, new laughter rises, completing the circle of memory with the sound of small footsteps crunching over dry leaves. Adults may understand the deeper meaning of Samhain, the boundary between life and death, memory and spirit, but children feel it instinctively. They sense that this night is different. They feel something both frightening and beautiful, cold yet warm, as if the autumn wind carries stories they do not yet understand, but already believe in. When a child laughs beneath the glow of a jack-o'-lantern, they may not know the legend of Jack-o'-lantern or the ancient fires on Celtic hills, but within that laughter, those old flames still burn. Because Halloween, no matter how many meanings it carries, is ultimately simple. It is the joy of lighting up the dark. Children do that effortlessly. They do not try to remember, and perhaps that's why they remember the longest. To them, every pumpkin has a soul, every candle a heartbeat, every piece of candy a small spell. And in their cheerful game of trick or treat, we glimpse the echo of an ancient rite, the ritual of giving and receiving, where adults offer and children take, just as the world passes its light from one generation to the next. It's no coincidence that Halloween is called the Night of Children and Spirits. The two may seem far apart, but in truth they are close. Both are invisible, both believe in magic, and both live by the light of imagination. Adults light lanterns to remember the past. Children carry them forward to brighten the future. Between those two gestures flows the current of continuity. Where memory never dies, it merely changes hands. When you see a child walking through the wind, holding a glowing jack-o'-lantern, it is more than a sweet image. It is a symbol of humanity itself, of our ability to keep believing no matter how much the world changes. Each child is a little Jack, carrying their own flame through the night, not to prove anything, but to illuminate a small stretch of darkness with joy. And perhaps that is the secret of Halloween's immortality. It endures not because it is celebrated, but because it is believed in. Children don't care about origins, philosophy, or ritual. They only need light, laughter, and the feeling that even in the dark, there is beauty. When they grow up, they may forget many things, but the memory of Halloween, the smell of pumpkins, the sound of laughter, the glow of lanterns in the mist will remain like a small flame flickering in the mind. And one day, when they light a candle for their own children, they'll tell the same story. Not with lessons or books, but with a smile. Once, on this very night, I too carried a lantern like you. That is how humanity keeps the flame alive, not with grand rituals, but with small hands, not with prayers, but with laughter. Halloween endures not because the old remember, but because the young still believe. And as long as there is even one child who believes that there is magic in the dark, the flame of Halloween will keep burning. The gentle breath of life carried through the autumns of time. When each Halloween season arrives, it's not only people who change their colors. The earth itself changes its breath. The air turns cool and crisp. The autumn wind carries the scent of wood and smoke and the faint taste of early frost. Leaves fall, the soil sleeps, the sky darkens. And in that quiet transformation, Something sacred seems to happen, though no one quite says it aloud. Halloween cannot be separated from nature because its roots are born of the earth. Samhain, the ancient festival that gave birth to Halloween, was not only a rite for the dead, it was also a celebration of the living land. The Celts held it after the final harvest, when fields lay bare and barns were full for winter. It was a moment of gratitude to the earth, the mother who had fed them through the summer, and an acceptance that all life must pass through rest before renewal. Indeed, on those Samhain nights, great fires were lit on the hills, not just to guide wandering souls, but to return energy to the soil. The fire was like the heartbeat of the planet, reminding everyone that even while the surface sleeps deep within, the earth is preparing for another season. The soil breathes, the trees rest, the water stills, and humans learn to do the same. To pause, to remember, to listen. That's why Halloween is not a festival of death, but a festival of transition, the turning of one cycle into the next. It's nature's gentle reminder that nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed, only returning. Leaves fall into soil, soil nourishes seeds, seeds bloom again, and that same circle is our own. Death is not the enemy, but the rest between movements in the music of life. Modern life has pulled us far from nature. We live behind concrete walls under artificial light, our days ruled by clocks instead of seasons. Yet Halloween quietly pulls us back. Through small symbolic gestures we hardly notice. The pumpkin, a fruit of the earth. The candle, the element of fire. The rustle of wind through dry leaves. The whisper that the world still moves with us. All of it is the earth's voice, murmuring in a language that only those who are still can hear. And when we carve a pumpkin and light it from within, we repeat an ancient act, giving soul to matter. Humans have always believed that everything around them holds spirit. The stone, the tree, the stream, the flame. Halloween is the night when that belief quietly returns, even if we don't name it. We carve the pumpkin, give it a face, light its heart. The same way the Celts once looked at the soil and said, "We know you are still alive." There is no religion in that, only gratitude. Deep down, Halloween is a thank you to nature, for life and for death, for teaching us that no ending is ever final, only a return in another form. If you listen closely on Halloween night, between gusts of wind and rustling branches, you might hear something faint, the whisper of the earth. It doesn't speak in words, but in feeling, that we are small but never alone, that we are just one breath in the endless rhythm of the universe. And that is what makes existence beautiful. That is why Halloween has always belonged to autumn, not by chance, but because only when nature begins to close its eyes do we remember that we are part of it. No one watches a leaf fall without feeling their hearts slow. No one sees the earth sleep without thinking of their own rest to come. A rest that no longer feels frightening because we know everything will rise again. At its deepest, Halloween is humanity's way of listening to the voice of the earth. And every time we pause, light a lantern, or simply stand still as the wind passes through the trees, we take part in that ancient ritual, one that needs no priest, no temple, only a heart willing to listen. So when we call Halloween the Night of Souls, it's true, but not just the souls of the dead. it is also the soul of the earth, the place where all life begins and where all memory returns. The candle in the pumpkin, the laughter in the streets, the leaves beneath our feet. All of it is the planet breathing, reminding us that we do not live outside of it, but within it.
Long ago, when people spoke of magic, they thought of witches and spells, of secret rites whispered under moonlit hills. Today, Halloween is still full of magic, but that magic no longer comes from ashes or charms. It comes from the human imagination.
No gods appear on the night of October 31st, yet millions of people together turn the world into a living stage. Every house becomes a tiny fortress of light, every costume a story, every painted face a soul revealing something unspoken. The magic is not supernatural. It is the quiet miracle of creativity and belief. The idea that if we light up our imagination, anything can come alive again. If ancient Samhain called upon spirits through ritual, then modern Halloween calls upon memory through art. Movies, paintings, songs, costumes, television specials, online videos. They are all spells of our time. They turn the unseen into visible, fear into story, death into something we can look at and even smile about. That is the new magic. The magic of symbols. A child dressing as a witch does not wish to cast spells, but to feel the thrill of transformation. The power of make-believe. An adult placing a jack-o'-lantern on their porch does not seek to banish spirits, but to light a corner of the world, and perhaps a stranger's heart. Every simple act carries what all ancient magic once aimed for. Connection, less. Because Halloween, under all its layers, is not a night about ghosts. It's a night about people meeting people. No one celebrates Halloween alone. It lives in shared glances, in laughter at the door, in the knock followed by trick or treat whispered through the wind. In a world that often feels divided, Halloween becomes a social spell. One night a year when we open our doors to strangers, when adults and children, rich and poor, all stand equal in the simple ritual of sharing a piece of candy and a smile. That is what makes Halloween unlike any other holiday. It is not just tradition, not just nostalgia. It is an art of living. The art of turning fear into play, darkness into light, loneliness into connection. No witchcraft required, only imagination. And within that imagination, people rediscover a kind of freedom that everyday life often takes away. If you look closely, modern Halloween holds another quieter kind of magic, healing. On this night, we are allowed to laugh at our fears. What we worry about, we paint it, wear it, perform it. And by doing so, we make it harmless. Like a child giggling at a ghost made of a white sheet, we reclaim what once frightened us. It is the oldest form of magic there is, to give fear a shape, and then smile as it fades. The Celts once believed magic was the energy of the universe, flowing through trees, through soil, through people. Perhaps modern humans have forgotten that language, but we still use the same force in another form, creativity. When we paint, write, tell stories, light candles, or make someone smile, we are practicing magic. Not with words of power, but with sincerity. Maybe Halloween endures not because of ritual, but because it touches something timeless, the human desire to create beauty in the dark. Magic never dies, it only changes its tools. Once it was fire and prayer, now it is light and storytelling. But its purpose remains the same, to bring a little light into a vast world. Seen this way, Halloween becomes a mirror of humanity's journey. From survival fires to creative expression, from ritual to art, from magic to compassion, a passage from instinct to understanding. And so even in an age of technology, Halloween keeps its enchantment. Not in ashes or ancient spells, but in the gentle glow on someone's face as they smile in the night. No one can fully define that magic, but everyone can feel it. It is the laughter of children, the lantern light of the old, the warmth that moves through cold air. And perhaps that is the last magic humanity will ever need, the power to make one another believe in something beautiful. As Halloween night fades, the streets slowly fall quiet again. The laughter drifts into memory, the small footsteps of children leave the pavement, and the jack-o'-lanterns burn low, their flames trembling softly in the wind. On the ground, fallen leaves cover candy wrappers, candles collapse into ash, smoke melts into the morning fog. The night ends, but the feeling doesn't. There's always that fleeting moment when everything is still, yet you can almost hear something, the breathing of the world. As if the earth, the sky, humanity, and memory all inhale together, then exhale in one long, gentle sigh. Halloween is no longer a noisy celebration, but returns to its oldest form, the silence after the fire. It's the part most people overlook, and the most beautiful one, because only when the flame has died can we truly see the light it left behind. Not the light of candles, but the light within us, the one that lingers beneath laughter, behind masks, beneath the echoes of joy. A quiet warmth that doesn't need to perform, that only remains once everything else has faded. The ancient Celts called this moment the hush of the harvest. It was when, after long days of gathering crops, they would sit by the empty fields and feel the stillness of completion, the soft satisfaction of something fulfilled. Halloween, though transformed through the centuries, still carries that same sensation. The peace that follows when humans touch something sacred. In that silence, no one is afraid. No one is laughing. No one is pretending. There is only you, your breath, your memory, and a small but profound awareness. You are still here. The last jack-o'-lantern glowing in the dark doesn't shine for anyone else. It shines inward, onto the truest part of you, the part that has been quiet all year. And in that dim orange light, you realize you are not an observer of some holiday, but a part of the endless rhythm of living, dying, remembering, and loving.
Last night you laughed with children. You wore a mask, lit candles, told stories. But this morning, when everything is cold and still, what remains isn't the game, it's the meaning. A meaning that's hard to name, yet deeply felt, like the scent of cooling ash, or the lingering taste of a memory you just rediscovered.
Some say Halloween is only a night of fun, but really, it's a quiet conversation between humans and time. We don't speak through words, but through light, through breath, through the act of pausing and noticing the world around us. On that night, whether we realize it or not, we repeat what our ancestors once did, sitting by the fire, watching the darkness, listening as our hearts beat in time with the earth. Maybe that's why Halloween always leaves a strange aftertaste, not exactly joy, not quite sadness. It's like the echo after a long piece of music, when the final note fades, but the sound still hangs in the air. A silence full of meaning. A moment where nothing more needs to be done. Only listening. Because some things can only be heard in stillness. When laughter fades, when the wind stops, when the candles go out, that's when memory begins to speak. And in the end, that's what Halloween truly is. A pause. A night when humans allow themselves to stop running, to stop pretending, and simply sit beside the darkness without fear. When dawn comes, the ashes will be swept away, the leaves will decay, the costumes will be tucked back into closets. Life resumes, responsibilities return. But somewhere inside someone, a small light remains. A quiet, inexplicable warmth, as if something has been set gently back in its place. It doesn't need a name or an explanation. It's enough to know that last night you touched something real. Halloween always ends in silence. Not an emptiness, but a fullness of calm. The flame dies, but the warmth stays. And as you walk away, a small part of you remains. With the night, with the wind, with the earth, with that soft orange glow of the final candle, still breathing in the dark. The night has passed. Morning dew settles softly on the rooftops, and the world slowly returns to its familiar rhythm. The jack-o'-lanterns no longer glow on the porches, the laughter no longer drifts through the autumn wind. Yet somewhere deep inside, a small light still lingers, like an ember that refuses to die. That light is the flame that never goes out. After all the colors, costumes, and laughter, Halloween always returns to something simple. The fact that humans remember. We remember those who have gone. We remember who we once were. We remember that some fleeting moments, though fragile, are worth living for. The Celts once lit great fires to guide the souls of the departed. In the Middle Ages, people lit candles to pray for those who had passed. And today, we carve pumpkins and place a small flame inside to keep the light of memory alive. They're all different ways of saying the same thing. We have not forgotten, and we do not want to. That's what makes Halloween more than just a holiday. It's a ritual of memory, one that doesn't belong to any single faith or culture, but to the deepest instinct within us all, the longing to stay connected. We connect with the dead through light. We connect with the living through laughter. And we reconnect with ourselves through the quiet that comes when the night is over. If you look closely, you'll see that Halloween has never truly disappeared, not through wars, not through the rise and fall of empires, not through the changing of religions or the rush of modern life. It doesn't survive because it's protected. It survives because it's reborn. Each generation retells the story in its own way, and with every telling, a new lantern glows somewhere else in the world. Sometimes the flame is real, sometimes digital, sometimes just a soft spark in the memory. But it still burns, because no one can extinguish a fire lit by love. On Halloween night, people talk about death. But what this night truly celebrates is life. Not the loud, hurried kind, but the quiet one, the kind that pauses, reflects, and smiles at its own impermanence. Like a candle flickering in the wind, it knows it will fade, yet keeps shining until the very end. Maybe that's the simple wisdom Halloween offers humanity, that no light lasts forever, but its meaning can. No flame burns endlessly, But as long as someone lights it again, it will live for another season. And so, through the centuries, Halloween keeps returning, the quiet heartbeat of human memory. In today's world, where we live fast, forget fast, where everything shines but so little truly glows, Halloween feels like a slow, gentle breath. It reminds us that sometimes what we need is not more light, but one light with a soul. Whenever we gaze into a jack-o'-lantern, at any age, we feel something we can't quite name. Part joy, part sadness, part alive, part longing. That's what Halloween really is. Not an ending, not a beginning, but the space in between. The space between life and death. Between memory and the present. Between light and shadow. And within that space we see the quiet beauty of existence. The beauty of something fragile, yet full of meaning. When we light a lantern, tell a story, put on a costume, or simply stand on the porch watching the wind flicker the flame, we're doing what our ancestors once did, and what our children will do long after us, keeping the fire alive, not the fire of religion, not the fire of power, but the fire of humanity, the fire that remembers, that feels, that trembles and yet still burns, not to conquer the darkness, but to live alongside it. And perhaps that's why the light of Halloween has never gone out, because it doesn't burn on the hills or in the temples. It burns in the human heart. Each of us is a small lantern glowing in the endless night of time. And when our light fades, someone else will pick it up, and the path will shine again, just a little further on. Halloween is not just one night of the year. It is the collective memory of humankind, the way we have learned to walk through darkness, holding even the smallest light in our hands. And as long as someone lights a candle, as long as someone remembers, as long as someone keeps telling the story, that flame, the lantern that never dies, will continue to burn. Not brightly, not loudly, but quietly, gently, and endlessly. A lantern of memory, of life, of humanity. A small light, yet bright enough to keep us from losing our way in the long night of time. Tonight, we have walked through time from the flames of Samhain to the lanterns of today. And though the night fades, the light remains. For as long as there is memory, there will always be a little flame beneath the stars. Lunora, where history whispers, gently guiding you into a peaceful sleep.